Hi everyone, welcome again to ChessUp 2 on chess.com. Hopefully we are playing those black pieces as white games are nearly heading to the second part and close to the conclusion. So today we are playing black pieces and we are going to do the Phillidor defense. Unfortunately, because whites aren't playing as much of the e4 openings, then we aren't able to always play the opening that we would like to play. So we are going to start atypically with knight e7, trying to push the e5 and achieve our typical setup. So when white plays e5, right now e5 on our part looks strange. And if we play knight f6, then e5 looks like it could be a problem. So it looks like we got into a position we necessarily didn't want. But it's something that also it's possible to learn from. So if we play knight f6 and the e5 happens, then taking on e5, if pawn takes, then our position will be a little bit weakened. But if we make white to play knight to c3, then e5 all of a sudden will be a correct transposition. So we are going to risk it, even though e5 might be really annoying for us. It's definitely worth the risk. The reward isn't so great. But as soon as white plays bishop d3, we are into Phillidor, where white usually plays bishop c4, but now it's not the case. Perhaps it would be worth for white to play d5. They're gonna play bishop e3, which is okay move, but we will potentially want to explore move knight to g4. So we're definitely going to develop pieces in the spirit of a Phillidor. And after castling, now knight g4 looks definitely like a move we would want to do. And see if we can get a pair of bishops. Knight g4 looks like a move we would want to do. But we are going to castle first, just like white has, before we do any action in the center. Knight to d2 happens, and now it's absolutely impossible for white not to lose the pair of bishops. So I see no reason why not to go for this. Unlike in positions where the knight is on c6, white doesn't have any intermezzo with knight takes e5 and knight takes c6 counterattacking our queen. And I feel here we can potentially string some nice attack as well with bishop g5 eventually. But white is deciding to keep the position on lock for now. And I'm not 100% sure what would be our follow-up. However, something tells me that this double pawn on e3 might be quite strong in the future. White has potentially the f-file for themselves. But to be frank, that's all they are having at the moment. Now the question is, we need to decide what to do with our pieces. Something tells me like arriving with the knight here would be nice, but we need to keep an eye on this pawn. And one of the interesting moves could be as well. But this is the thing, we need to decide what side of the board we would like to play on and how we would like to play our pieces. It almost feels as if we want to trade this bishop on bishop g5, but at the same time it feels like we want to keep that bishop. As if this bishop would be best to trade it for the knight. And for that I feel we can try and stir some pressure on the e-file, where possible, if possible. So I'm going to first pretend that I'm interested into potentially increasing pressure towards the center. But the truth is somewhere else. I will try and maybe reroute the bishop. Queen c2 is potentially useless move because I will never want to take on d4 and open up this bishop. That's potentially a dangerous bishop. Instead I can still pretend of some sort of development. So I'll play queen e7. Always pretend like I want to take on d4, but the truth is, and the reality is, that I never really intend to do so. What in fact I would like to do is to activate this bishop. Now I believe I have the time to reposition the knight. So I'll put the knight here. The whole idea is so I can recapture here and have the e5 under control. I would not mind white to push a pawn onto d5. And a4 happens, that's all good. And I'm actually feeling like fixating this pawn on a4 will be a good potential target for us. So for now we will try and do that. So our strength is probably lying on more on the queen side, but it's not 100% sure if we really want to play there. We're not 100% sure of that. 。 This position is quite difficult to untangle for me, and I can't even decide who's better and who's worse, because white has the open f file. He's got more pawns in the center, albeit some of them are double, and they can still activate the bishop through this diagonal. So it's, in ideal scenario, I would like this pawn push already happen. I would like to have the center already resolved. And I can almost force a trade with playing knight c4. It's difficult to find a plan for either side. And I don't know who to favor. So white is going to go with a central attack. The plan might be to play c5 actually. And if c5 happens, we definitely want to trade on c5 as many times as we possibly can, because this would fix this weakness, and it would also give us the d file. Our knight will go back to c8. We just need to be careful of one thing, that if c5 happens and we take, then if we take knight takes e4, there's potential of trapping our knight on a4, so we really need to be careful and aware of that. And I'm starting to feel like our position is slightly better than black's, than our opponents, the whites. It almost feels as I would like to play. If I can only force e4 push, that would be really nice. But at the moment the position holds for white. I'm not sure how to untangle our pieces. g5, bishop g5. So this is our good bishop. However, we don't have much scope for that bishop, to be honest. So I'm feeling like playing move like bishop e6 and simply asking for them to play the d5 pawn. d5 push, and then we can maybe trade the bishop from g4. So we are going to try this, bishop to e6. Maybe much better is to actually play bishop g4 and trade that bishop, as after d5 there will not be any scope left for that bishop. But there will be a lovely square for our knight onto c5. So, but white can play h3 and totally prevent our bishop from having any fun. Unless we then can play maybe bishop g5, but then this pawn is going to be super soft. Rook c1. So white is preparing for push on to c5. And this is perhaps a moment where we would like to play knight to d7. But if h3 happens, then we will be really in a bad shape with that bishop. So but I have an idea that's kind of interesting. The idea in closed positions is to sometimes maneuver your knights around. And I want my knight going through b8 to a6 and then to b4. Which could make our knight really interesting. Or actually it can go through b8 and c6 onto b4 as well. So it's the whole idea is to try and improve our piece by piece. The knight would be best sitting on c5 as things stand, but from b4 it can have some interesting scope as well. And I remember when I was playing whites in certain openings like Nimzo Indian, I found them really difficult sometimes. So white is basically following the same strategic motion. He would like to put the knight here and potentially onto d5. So our idea will definitely be to go through a6 as we should be able to. But right now, if the knight goes here, we can really pretend that we want to take on f3 and then we can win the pawn on d4. So I believe now bishop g4 could have a bit more strength because we can take, and bishop takes d4. And on knight c3 we just prevent any jump from onto b5 or d5 with the move pawn to c6. It's been a long time since I get in this super quiet position. But I guess it's more likely to happen in Phillidor than in Sicilian. So white is heading on to d5. We shall just simply take that square away from them. And that will hopefully make this knight useless. And I'm expecting after e takes d4 to also win a really lovely square for our knight on e5. So right now, I believe white has to do some decision in the center. Because if not, we are threatening to take, and then take, and we are winning a pawn. And since it's a central pawn, it could be really, really important pawn to win. The only other thing that I think for white could be that they will potentially sacrifice the pawn with move like e5 and take on h7 with a check. So after we take here, then they push forward, we take with the bishop, they take bishop h7, king h8. But there will also be a danger of us playing queen to h3 at some of those positions. And we will definitely have also a move like knight to f6 to try and prevent. However, it could be dangerous if we take on f3 and white takes with the rook on f3. Those types of positions will be super difficult for us to defend. So we still need to be very careful before taking on d4, because pawn to e5 looks super dangerous for us. Yes, because rook on f3 is already super strong here. So grabbing pawn on d4 doesn't look really realistic. I'll give a line. If it was our move, we take here, rook takes. Now we take pawn. Now they push forward. We take with the bishop or the knight. It doesn't matter in this case. Now they will play bishop h7, king h8, rook h3. And they will have already a threat of bishop g8 check. The rook is doing the check, and then queen h7 checkmate. So that looks already super dangerous for us to even think of taking on e4 before we actually do something with this very soft pawn. So I believe move like g6 could be really good first move before we take on f3. So we can renew the threat of taking on d4, but first we need to play move g6. And now the threat is there. Bishop takes, rook takes, pawn takes. Now e5 doesn't no longer work, because there is no check here. So sometimes it's good to calculate on opponent's time, and when you are doing it actually on the real chessboard, you are learning a lot more about the position than if you are staring the screen online. So that's one of the big advantages of using digital board or product like ChessUp. So white is playing bishop e2, and I believe they don't understand what's going to happen next in the position. So we are going to take on f3. Now we are winning the clear pawn. And then we are housing the knight on e5 or c5, putting a lot more pressure on this pawn on e4. So now the position suddenly clears, and it's another strategic win. We just needed to be very patient. As you could see, we had to first prepare everything. That means the pawn g6. We needed to prepare the bishop g4 move. And finally, now we can take on d4. I think if you are playing against a stronger player, they would definitely be able to calculate that the danger that we have is actually taking on d4. This is why I think provoking the c4 move, which we didn't provoke actually, but making the c4 move is something that's very useful if you know, we have this strong bishop on this diagonal. So now we can put pressure on to c3. We can also just simply stop any further pushes with e5, and actually playing move like bishop e5 brings our own threat with queen to h4, as we will be threatening a checkmate, and white will only be able to play either h3 or g3 to stop it. And g3 itself is going to be a very difficult move to make, as we can win another pawn with bishop takes g3. The queen from here is going to be protecting the h2, but queen h4 now seems to be a big threat. If h3 happens, then queen to g3, threatening mate again. King would have to go to g1, and then we can start, you know, running havoc in doing something crazy in their position with moves like queen h2, king f2, bishop g3, already winning an exchange. And because we have two of the opposite colored bishop, we have dark square bishop, we have light square bishop, that always makes the attacking side much stronger, because this bishop cannot oppose our bishop. So when there's lots of pieces on the board and you have a bishop that's strong, actually if their bishop was dark square and our bishop would be light squared, they could use that bishop on all of these squares, and it would be suddenly us who is much worse rather than them. However, we have again like a very strong strategic bind on the position. We can slowly start improving our pieces. For example, knight to c5, e6, d4. So we have a couple of different ways how we can develop our pieces and start our attack. Now knight g3 could be very dangerous to play for white, because after queen h4 we will be threatening the bishop takes g3, and at the same time any jump away with the knight would be met with a checkmate. So we definitely want to play nice and slow at this position and improve our knight first. So I really liked the jump that I mentioned, going to e6 and then decide whether we want to jump on d4 or whether we're going to jump on e or f4 or g5 in some point. So knight g3 I think would be a very weak move from white. And actually I believe that would be already a losing move, because after knight g3, queen h4, as the knight cannot move from g3, queen f2, knight d3 would be already winning for us. As we are hitting the queen, queen has to move, then we are winning the knight here, threatening mate at the same time, so they will have no time to recapture the knight on d3, no matter where they move. So knight g3 looks like a worst possible scenario move for white. So given that we have this line with knight d3, we want to allow knight g3 to happen. So for that reason, for that very reason, we are going to keep the knight here and rather try and improve one of our rooks. Again, strategically, we have been able to achieve everything in our position. And as you can see, we have won the bishop early from the pair of bishops. We got rid of our bishop, which is normally strong, but had absolutely no scope. And now I believe this is also a losing move, because if nothing else, we are winning at least a pawn after queen h. Oh, after queen h4, they have actually moved knight to h3, so it's not completely losing yet. And the knight might want to go onto f3 at some point. So I much more prefer if we play queen h4 and the knight goes to h3, because we don't want the knight on f3. That's why we are going to play queen h4 first. g3, as I said, will be losing a pawn, because after bishop takes g3 they cannot recapture back. And they will simply have to move the rook. And after they move the rook, we can move just the bishop back. Or see if we can bring more pieces forward, like the knight. In some cases we might want to be jumping also with the knight d3, sacrificing the knight for possible checkmates. So white is Tom 06 from India with 1295 rating, and we are 1336 rated. So g3 happens. As I said, we don't need to worry about anything, we just capture on g3. We are now 2 pawns up. Not that the 2 pawns up we have important, but it's extra material and that always counts as something. We are also hitting here twice. It's 3 times protected, so I feel like we should be bringing more pieces forward. So now we can already win a free rook. But if we take rook takes, bishop takes e1, comes knight to f3, we can play queen to e4. I don't see a reason why not to take the rook on e1 and then trade into an endgame. So white wants to play knight to f3, which makes absolutely sense. But dropping the bishop down doesn't make that much sense. Apart from maybe white wants to protect the pawn b3, but pawn b3 is not the important piece here. So I would definitely take the rook. It's not the prettiest ending to the game, but it's definitely end to the game it's kind of expected now. So knight f3 indeed happens, so we can just take with the queen on e4. The knight's protecting nicely on e4. Now there were 3 defenders a moment ago when I mentioned it. Now there's only 1 defender left, and that's a queen, which decides to trade. Oh, so we'll be taking back. I was feeling as if I made a move, but obviously I have not made a move. It was just making the half move for our opponent. So as long as the knight is here, I am not going to worry about anything. I actually want to maybe try and win this rook with some trickery, with knight f2 check, for example. So as soon as this knight moves, the knight f2, knight g3 could be winning the rook in a corner. Oh, not in a corner, on e1. I'm just going to simply activate my own rook. Any active moves with the knight. Knight e4 doesn't even make sense, so I don't know why would white want to play it. So maybe the most active move I see is bishop c2. However, we can always play a move like f5 just to solidify the knight. Rook f1 makes sense. So again, I'm gonna play f5, solidifying the knight. Right now we have 2 minutes, but it's more than plenty of time to actually finish the game. Black has no counter, white has no counterplay. We have 3 pawns for a bishop and a rook, so we are up 5 points of material. So there's no more issue for white with the knight f2 fork. However, right now I think is the time to activate our king. With these 2 extra pawns and extra pawn in the center, this should be just a simple, offer a couple of trades and win the game on the spot. There's not much to discuss here. Knight h4 does not threaten anything, to be honest, so we can just keep activating our king. We are having a whole chessboard for ourselves now, so I haven't considered it just yet, but I will probably start focusing on pushing the d5 pawn. Bishop c2 makes sense, however, from a global view, it's like a nothing move for us. If they take, we take back with the rook, so there's no tactics just yet. And we can also start pushing the d5, d6 pawn forward. C takes, c takes. Yes, it's a weak pawn, but actually we can turn it into strength real quick. King can also support from the e5. We are then going to be moving the rooks both on c and d file. So bishop d3 is a move. That's just about the move. Now king e5 actually does not mean much as white has knight to f3, so we are going to activate the rook on c file. The other rook will go on to d file. Again, taking on e4, we take back. There's no challenge. Knight f5, g f5. So white's pieces alone cannot hurt ourselves. The only thing that maybe white can do potentially is improve the knight by playing knight f3, knight d4, blockading this pawn. However, we are going to start applying more pressure with the rook c3. And it's maybe a good thing to either play knight d2, attacking the b3 pawn, or we can also trade the rooks on a c file. So actually very interesting that white is deciding to capture here. We will take with this pawn, so now it's a pass protected pawn. Knight d4 is no longer that strong. Knight d2 is actually a strong threat, to be honest, because white would like to play knight takes e4 check. we cannot recapture, and then our rook is hanging over here. But right now we can just simply go ahead with the king, but I don't want to go king e5 for knight c4 check, even though we can just simply sacrifice the rook for the knight and be fine. I would much rather play something slightly more. So we have option of playing rook e8, but the knight c4 is still a little bit annoying. We will have rook takes b3. There's no check from c4, so we are going to protect the e4 pawn. If possible, to help it, I would like to play first b6 before I play rook d3. Rook e1 is simply not a threat, and we don't have much time, so I'll play rook pawn b6. We are simply protecting twice here. There's no more issue with that. Knight c4 happens, and the whole idea was to take on b3 whilst we are protecting the b6, and that protects the a5 pawn. Knight d3 happens. White wants to play knight d5, so we stop that with rook d8. The position is still a little bit open, and the knight could be really annoying. But we should be able to annoy the knight ourselves, so we're gonna play this move. Knight e3 happens. Where can the knight go from there? Okay, we're gonna stop any knight jumps. So knight e5 is protected with the rook, knight c4, c2 is protected with both of the rooks. And the next phase is to start pushing this pawn forward. We're gonna play h5. This is to stop any knight g4s once we start pushing forward. So now we can do this. And we are going forward with the king. Let's also stop any knight d5 ideas. Knight c2 hitting rook, so we are going to take the pawn. Actually, quite frankly, we could have won the knight, so we are going to do that next move. So now we're going to pin the knight to the king. We're going to take the knight. So, and the worst thing that can happen to us is that we are going to lose one of the pawns. And with a couple of these quick moves, we got now enough time on our clock. We gained those 10 seconds per move, so we had more than 1 minute after this really quick conversion. And White decides to concede. So we won another game with the Phillidor, and the Phillidor is doing well. So is doing the Sicilian Khan. And I don't feel like we were ever in danger in this game, but I think against a stronger opponent, in that position where I kept struggling to find some concrete plan. We had to find like a lot more maneuvering, a lot more quieter moves before the position got clearer. And the whole thing was decided by white dropping the very important center pawn on d4, just simply by overextending and forgetting what's the most important in the position. So I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well. I would like to thank all the subscribers, all the returning viewers for your support, and I hope you will have a lovely morning or evening wherever you are, and I'll see you at the next game. Bye.